The Infernal Hordes are an extremely rewarding and, in my subjective opinion, very fun game mode added with Season 5. Though as a permanent addition to the game, I expect we're going to be seeing a lot more of them in the future, and Blizzard has already discussed the fact that they want to upgrade them, so this video might become out of date, and if so, keep an eye out for an updated version. But for now, I'm going to talk about my experiences in the Infernal Hordes and some of the strategies that I've used to get a significant amount of burning ether. This being the reward currency that you turn in at the end to get all of that sweet, sweet loot. And by loot, I mean tons and tons of items, lots of gold, and of course, crafting materials that you can use to masterwork your items. Before we get into how to run the compasses, you need to know how to obtain them. After you complete the Enemy's Eyes priority quest, they're going to start dropping pretty much everywhere. Also, you can craft them with sigil powder. For more details on how to obtain the compasses, the quest, etc., check out my dedicated video. It's something that's very easy to miss, unfortunately. Hopefully in the future, Blizzard will make it more obvious. Beyond that, you need to decide which tier of compass to run. And there's really no magic bullet here. It's kind of just trial and error. I've been playing a Fireball Sork, which means I have really good clear and AoE and relatively poor single target. It's an amazing starter build. Couldn't have asked for a better starter build, but in terms of high-end content, it does fall behind some of the other choices. I can do 7s, so I do a lot of 6s when I want stuff fast, 7s when I can sit down for like 20-30 minutes and grind one out because it is much slower. With good gear, with mythic uniques, I do think a good number of builds can do 7s. 8s, you're probably going to want something like a support, some party play, or an incredibly strong build. But ultimately, compasses are common enough that I just fire it up, see how it goes. If you get wrecked, do something a little lower. If it's easy, do something a little higher. So now let's take a look at the best strategy for gathering ether. So far, I found the best thing to do is click every possible Hellborn modifier. These give you the most burning ether, so they're the best, they persist even after the 60-second round timer ends, and they are incredibly easy to scale. With that said, it is a little bit more complicated, and understanding how each of these mechanics interacts does definitely help you make the correct choice when the answer isn't obvious, such as when you aren't being offered a Hellborn modifier, since after all, there's 3 choices and you get to pick one of them. So there are 3 baseline mechanics and 2 mechanics that can be added in. The first baseline mechanic is Soul Spires. You need to kill enemies in radius of the spire. And personally, I find this one to be very awkward. Not only do you often have to run over to the spire, especially if you don't have the Corrupting Spires upgrade, but then you have to position yourself such that the enemies run into the spire to be instantly killed, and you may need to wait for more enemies to spawn. Worse yet, one of the later more rewarding upgrades is you have to kill the spire with twice as many enemies to get twice the ether. In theory, cool. In practice, now I'm just more likely to fail them because once the round ends, the spire despawns. Then second up we have Ether Fiends. The downside here is you need to walk over and spawn them, but the upside is the elite spawns do scale pretty decently, especially if you get double elite chance, and as they are elites, they're fairly easy to deal with. So once they're spawned, you can kind of just run around in circles laughing ha 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 while CCing all the enemies. Just do be very careful. If you stack too many elite damage modifiers, they will one-shot you, and if you give them unstoppable, they are far more annoying to deal with, so I don't recommend clicking that modifier. Who knew making enemies immune to your crowd control was bad, when the best way to trivialize enemies is to crowd control them. Then the third permanent mechanic is masses. You can kill these from a distance, and enhancing their ether is pretty effective, especially if you get teaming masses, where after you kill the mass itself, you get an Ether Lord. This is a powerful boss that drops 3 ether themselves. Whether investing into masses is a good or a bad idea depends entirely on where your build is. If your build is super strong, you instantly zap everything on the screen and you are immortal, at least for whatever difficulty of Infernal Horde you're farming, then absolutely go for masses as a secondary effect. But if you're struggling and bosses are scary, then don't go for this, because scaling your masses is inevitably going to involve bosses. Understanding the differences between these 3 mechanics is very important, because as you take a modifier for a mechanic, it spawns more frequently. So if I'm clicking a bunch of mass stuff and I don't want mass stuff, that's a bad idea. I'm going to get a whole bunch of masses that spawn a whole bunch of bosses that I can't deal with. Now, in addition to these permanent mechanics, there are 2 mechanics that are spawned in by your choices. These being Ether Lords that we've already covered, and Hellborn. Hellborn are more elites, or pseudo-elite monsters. They drop ether. You can scale them by having them drop more ether or have more of them spawn. They are incredibly easy to scale, and beyond all, they're relatively easy to deal with because you can just CC them, which is of course a lot harder on the boss monsters. So Hellborn are totally insane. If I'm spawning lots of Hellborn, I will get something like 100 plus burning ether from a single wave. So far my record is about 850 total burning ether, which was absurd. It hasn't happened since. I don't know if it'll happen again, but it was very fun to experience. Then the last modifier that I strongly recommend you look out for is Exalted Hordes. This means you get more progress from killing the regular monsters. More progress means more spawns means more Hellborn, which means more ether, which means more rewards. Beyond that, there are of course things that you don't want to take. One example of this is a demon stalks you. This spawns a burning butcher. Now, if your build is anything like mine, I'm playing a sorceress, that burning butcher is highly likely to completely destroy you. It is very dangerous, and it only gives 25 flat ether. Similarly, there are modifiers that buff the council and give you 15 flat ether. Again, on a final wave, not so bad, especially if one that's minus 10% all resistances. As long as you're 10% res over the cap, you can click this every time and it's just free rewards. Except it's only 15, so again, I'd only take it on the later waves. So now that you know the general strategy on how to run the compasses, I'm going to give you a practical example where I go into a compass, make my choices, and talk through them. Upon entering the Infernal Horde, you're prompted with a single demon to kill. After you kill that demon, it starts spawning waves of enemies. You have 60 seconds to clear those waves. After this, you're going to be presented with a choice. You pick one thing from 3. Each of these options has a boon or an upside, usually something that lets you get more ether or gather ether more quickly, and a bane, a negative, a downside. It makes monsters deal more damage. It makes more monsters, which in and of itself might actually be a boon. There's something that's paired with the boon that is, at least in theory, detrimental. So I'm going to go through this entire run and talk about the choices that I make at each step of the way, going from wave 1, the first choice, all the way to wave 8, the final choice. Wave 1 down, and the 3 options are the bursting masses. Masses deal unavoidable damage. At wave start, spawn a mass. I do not like this one at all because the unavoidable damage is annoying to deal with. Then the gorging masses. Slaying a mass slows you, while still you have unlimited resources. Unstoppable. 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 I'd take this off, plus I have unlimited resources just from hitting enemies, so this one is completely useless. Now, if these 2 choices were so bad that it would be actively detrimental to click them, sure, take this, but otherwise give it a pass as it's not going to increase your rewards. But of course, Hellborn are hunting you. This is the best possible outcome, especially on wave 1. So we're going to pick this. And now, as we go around, Hellborn will start to spawn. The goal is to spawn and kill as many Hellborn as possible. And remember, after the timer ends, they do persist. So there we go, first Hellborn spawn. Wave 2 down. And you'll notice that I got 52 burning ether that time, up from the 20 from wave 1. Now there is some RNG there. Sometimes you're going to get more, sometimes you're going to get less just based on monster spawns. But in general, as you keep adding more and more bonuses, you should get more and more ether per wave. This is part of why doing compasses 8, 7, and 6 is far more rewarding than 5, 4, 3, even beyond just the raw number of rewards that each drops. So now, draining spires. Spires drain health, but give more ether. This would be bad because we don't want to build into spires. We're building into Hellborn. Corrupting spires. Spires pull foes in and empower them. This makes spires easier to deal with, but isn't necessarily the best option. Then there's Burning Rain, which by itself, this is a bad modifier. 1 to 3 flat ether is not very much. And the Hellfire dot is annoying if you step in one of the puddles. But there's a second boon you can take that causes the Hellfires, when they rain down, to spawn Hellborn. And since we're already building into Hellborn, this is what I'm going to go with. And you know what? I'm just going to hope the gamble pays off. Okay, we've finished off, up to 122 ether. Now there is Bursting Fiends. Ether Fiends explode, damaging nearby foes. This is a pretty bad modifier, and it's not worth the downside, because if you need the explosion damage, you're not clearing efficiently enough anyway. Exalted Elites. Elite damage increased. Ether Fiends grant +1 ether. If you're building into this, it's honestly not terrible, but definitely not ideal, as it does make elites much more dangerous if you can't permanently CC or instantly kill them. And then, last up, Ether Rush, where you get some movement speed and normal monster damage increased. Normal monster damage is largely irrelevant, so this is a very safe modifier to click. This might bias the reward pool a little bit. So it depends on if you want safe or greedy. Let's go with safe here. Wave down, roughly another 50 ether. We've got Draining Spires, Bursting Masses, and Exalted Hellborn. Draining Spires, not great. Bursting Masses, the masses deal unavoidable damage, again, making them much more dangerous, but you get 1 Aetheric Mass of a start, or Exalted Hellborn, where Hellborn grant +1 ether. Guess what? Ether's really, really good, and the Hellborn are getting CC'd enough that I'm not scared based on the damage. So I'm very much going to click this and go into the next wave, and let's see if we get over 50. I'm going to guess we get closer to 60 this time. Well, I got nearly 70. Yep, stacking Hellborn is very good. So, Gorging Masses, again, bad mod. Bursting Fiends, again, bad mod. Exalted Hellborn. If it worked last time, it's going to work this time. We want as many Hellborn spawns as possible because these are incredibly, incredibly valuable now. Well, 324 Burning Ether, so yes. Increasing the drops from Hellborn does in fact increase the total amount of Burning Ether you're able to acquire. At this point, Wave 6 going into 7, 3 new options. Exalted Elites, Ether Fiends grant +1. This will cause more Ether Fiends. Etheric Mass, +1. Again, more focus on masses, and Corrupting Spire. Soul Spires empower and pull things in. I don't want any of these options, to be honest. What I really want is Hellborn, but sometimes we don't get the options that we want. And so personally, I'm going to say that the Etheric Mass one is the least bad, because I can kill them from a distance, I don't have to get nearby for them to spawn, and overall they're not super dangerous or annoying. Okay, only 373 ether. I spawned way too many masses, not enough Hellborn. That's the problem with diversifying your strategy. Sometimes you don't get what you want. I did not have a choice though, and this run is still going to be really good. I'm definitely going to get over 400 regardless. There's 3 choices. Bursting Mass, which I'm definitely not going to take. Wander Enfeebled, playing around increased potion cooldown. You know what? I'm not really taking damage. That's 315 ether. Or reduce all resist by 10%. Well, I am playing a sorceress. I have like 100% overcap. It's totally fine. I can click this with no downside because it reduces your res, not your maximum res. I feel like in the future it's going to be changed to reduce all max res, which will make it insanely dangerous and never worth clicking. But hey, for now, it's a free win. All right, so before the council, 445. I would definitely call this an above average run. In fact, it's pretty darn good, but it's not perfect. For example, I took that Hellfire, never even ended up getting the Hellfire spawns Hellborn, so that was a waste of a round. But hey, at least you didn't make the drops worse. Okay, council down, 490 total. My experience has been, if things go pretty decently, 300 to 400 on average. If they go insanely well, especially in the higher tier waves, we're talking 5, 6, even 700. Yes, I did have a 700 God roll once. That was on a T7, so I got so many rewards, so much Neath Iron. It was actually insane. Now we have the 4 reward chests that you can choose from. First up, Spoils of Greater Equipment. This gives you lots of uniques and a decent number of things with greater affixes. In this case, just the uniques and also some abyssal scrolls. Now from here, you've got a couple of options. On the left, you can click the Spoils of Equipment if you want more uniques and if you want more legendary items. Greater affixes seem to appear a decent amount of the time, but this wouldn't be my first choice in terms of getting greater affixes. Look, a unique. Now look, a greater affix. Then over here, you get materials. Scattered prisms, all sorts of gem stuff, and you do get pit materials. Now, in tier 6, I'm getting Ingolith, but in tier 7 and 8, you get Neath Iron. And this does have a chance to give Stygian stones. I'm going to click it a little bit more, or actually a lot more, as I have like 200 ether left. And see if I can get any Stygian stones to drop here. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I've noticed they're much more common in tier 7 and above. You'll also notice plenty of abyssal scrolls that you can use to upgrade your compasses. When you no longer have 20, just click the gold chest. If you need gold directly in tier 6 and below, this is also a pretty good way to get gold directly. And so that's a little bit on how to pick all the modifiers and spend your rewards when completing Infernal Compasses. So, like I just touched on, there's 4 chests. The big one that costs 60 you can only open once. It tends to give a lot of uniques and a fair number of greater affix items. To the left, you've got a legendary chest. It also gives a fair number of uniques, but it gives you less loot than the big one. Good news is you can keep on clicking it. Then the chest to the right that gives you materials will start by just giving you gem fragments, ores, leathers, that sort of thing. At higher levels, it also gives pit materials. In fact, it generally gives pit materials at a rate that is higher than doing the pit itself. This makes the Infernal Hordes extremely lucrative, though I wouldn't be surprised if this is patched out in the future. And so if you want to keep up with any update videos I make, do be sure to get subscribed, maybe even leave a like while you're down there to tell the YouTube algorithm to share this to more people. Then the last chest on the far right gives you gold. Now, if you don't like trading and you need gold, go ahead and click this. If you do like trading, if you're doing like 7+, it's actually probably more gold efficient to click the materials chest and sell the stygian stones. But hey, in 6s and below, gold chest actually really solid. It's definitely way more efficient than doing something like whispers. So that's been my experience doing the Infernal Hordes, the strategies that I've personally found to be successful, some of my experiences with each of the sub-mechanics, some of the boons I take, all that stuff, and hopefully this example gives you a good direction to pursue within your own run. That said, I'm curious. What mechanics do you really enjoy? And let's just make it a little bit fairer and say what mechanics outside of Hellborn, because I think everyone loves Hellborn. It's tons of extra enemies, it's tons of extra loot. What about the others? Are you a mass enjoyer? Or maybe you like Aether Fiends? Or are you one of those few weirdos that love standing in circles for soul spires? Sorry, we're not supposed to judge here. But let me know some of your favorite mechanics down in the comments below. If you're feeling a little confused on how to get started because you don't have any compasses, then do check out my dedicated video. Or if you're curious about my build, then I'll link to that up in the card and down below as well. Then last up, I'd like to take a minute to thank my patrons and channel members for the continued support. For as low as $1 a month, you can make videos just like this one possible. Link to support is down below. And a big thanks to everyone who watched to the end of the video. I'm glad you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. May you have those successful 500 and 600 Ether runs now, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next one.